Hey everyone. Please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. So I was going through the old modules, and I came across the Slaver series, and that's what I want to start talking about today on Greyhawk Ragnarok. So the Slavers series, A1 through 4, are a favorite of old school D&D fans from back in the day. They were published in 1980 to 81. There are 4 in the series. I'm going to talk about the first one today, Slave Pits of the Undercity by Dave Cook, adventure levels 4 through 7. And I have a confession to make. I'm not a huge fan of these modules. I don't dislike them, but they don't have the same place in my heart as like Temple of Elemental Evil or Village of Hamlet or something like that does. But that doesn't mean they're bad. It's just they didn't really capture me at that time. The first one is from 1980. It was the tournament scenario at Gen Con 13, so that'll give you some idea. Um, and it's got the separate thing. It's got the nice blue maps, yay. Um, and one of the things that is interesting about this is the first tournament module that I'm aware of that actually had different maps and encounters for whether or not you were running it as a tournament or as a standalone module. If you're running it as a tournament, there's certain different rules. There's no random, wandering monsters. There are areas of the map that are closed off to the players, that sort of thing. So it's much more designed to channel the PCs into a consistent experience, so that you could judge different teams about how they do it in the module. Um, and they change the maps around to there's certain areas are blocked out and so forth. One of the things I really don't like about this module is that, as far as I'm aware, this was the first module that got rid of pig-faced orcs. Those are supposed to be orcs and half orcs and so forth, and they definitely don't look like the pig-faced orcs that I was used to in G1. Uh, yeah, G3 and G2, G1 and so forth. So I was very I'm still bitter about that. There are some interesting monsters that we see in here. This was the first um, the first appearance of the aspis and the giant sundew plant. I'm always a fan of plants. The tournament characters they give 9 of them. They give full stats and magic items and stuff like that. What I don't like about this is that they don't give any kind of background. They just kind of, they are stats and magic items and so forth. So they even give you the spells that are memorized, which for a tournament module makes perfect sense. But I kind of like it when they use the characters as an excuse to build the setting. But I guess for a tournament module, that's not really necessary. So I understand it. Um, Couple of things that if you read through the module again, it's been several years since I reread it for this. For this video, but a couple of things stood out to me that didn't really latch on before. This is for the first paragraph in the module, part of the background. Um, for several years, organized bands of pirates and slavers have made a living by raiding the coastal towns on the Sea of Girnat, ranging from Onwall to the wild coast. They have descended quickly and ruthlessly on the small towns and villages and carried off innocent citizens into the night. Okay, so first of all, this kind of expands the range of the slavers. For some reason, in my mind, I always had it that the slavers were only on the wild coast, right, and only on the Woolly Bay. But no, they go from over here all the way to over here on the Sea of Uranus. So they're covering a much wider swath of territory than I had originally had it in my mind for whatever reason, which is a good thing. One of the things I also like about this is that this kind of carries the story it carries the story forward, because the town where it's located, which is right here where I'm pointing on the map behind me, uh, in Highport. Originally in the Gold Box, they didn't make any mention of it being overrun by humanoids, but here it's been basically conquered by the humanoids of the Pomarge, which is kind of it differs, but it differs in a logical way that kind of carries forward the setting story, which I do enjoy. The whole thing takes place in a ruined temple in the town of Highport, and the temple itself. Let me bring out yonder map. Um, no, which way am I going? Right there it is. This one. So it does look like a regular, it does look like a bit of a temple. There's the requisite dungeons beneath and so forth, so that's the focus of the thing. You don't really get a lot of information about the town itself. There was a follow-up, follow-up. There was another module set in Highport, also dealing with slaves, in Dungeon 221, I think it was, where the PCs are hired to basically find an escape route for escaped slaves because they can't smuggle them out anymore, so they have to find an underground route. So there's some sea caves and so forth. So if you really wanted to, you could probably link that into this. And and get something really clever. I would love to see like a full blown treatment of Highport as an occupied city, and a hub of slavers and so forth. I mean, if for even for a city that's on the Wild Coast, it seems like that would be a step above in terms of debauchery and villainy and so forth. So that could be really interesting. Some weird choices in here. They don't name the slave lords that are in the module. They do later on when they did the compilation module that adds a bunch of stuff into it. Slavers, uh, or against the slave lords. Slavers comes later. Against the slave lords, they do name them there, and then they kind of change the name later on. It's a little confusing, but it's really neat. Now they because of all the orcs and everything that are in the temple. The implication is that the temple has been rededicated to Grumsh, the Orcish god, and that the slave lord who's a cleric, that sixth level evil cleric here, is also they say on the dais rests a gigantic statue. The statue is of a one-eyed orc-like humanoid standing with legs spread, holding a sword in both hands above his head. So, it's a temple of Grumsh, and the implication is that she's a cleric of Grumsh. If you really wanted to make this kind of flow from Temple of Elemental Evil, you could turn that into a Temple of the Eye. And that would be pretty easy to do, and that would actually give the PCs, some kind of logical connection. Because I know a lot of people like to go to this module after Temple of Elemental Evil, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally thematically. But if you really wanted to, you could start to nudge things in that direction by making that simple change there. Um, and you'd probably want to replace the orcs with a chaotic evil humanoid, maybe gnolls. Or you could do goblins, I suppose, if you bumped up the numbers. The reason is in Temple of Elemental Evil, they only have chaotic evil henchmen, right? Because the cult is chaotic evil, so all of the humanoids that are there are chaotic evil as well. So you see gnolls and ogres and stuff like that, but you don't see orcs or hobgoblins because they're lawful evil. So you'd need to change around the humanoids in the mon in A1 to make that work. But anyway, overall, it's not a bad thing. It really does show its tournament roots very plainly. There are traps and tricks to be avoided. There's a lot of combat. In fact, even at the very end, there are scoring adjustments for taking specific actions in specific rooms. So, like, if you at the start you cast invisibility on the halfling, you get 7 additional tournament points. So there's things that they want you to do in certain parts of this dungeon. So when you have those kinds of obvious, this is the solution to this problem, it makes it a little less enjoyable from my perspective, in terms of a long-term campaign or working this into your long-term Greyhawk campaign. But on the other hand, it does make things a lot clearer. So if you're dealing with a party that's maybe not as experienced in terms of the players, not the characters, this might be a good way to kind of continue on things once they hit fourth or fifth level, to kind of get them into the swing of how AD&D First Edition would work. So anyway, despite the fact that it is not one of my all-time favorites, I would still recommend it. It's still a very solid, decent module. There is the one issue where there's like a room on the map that you can't get into because they forgot to put a door in or something. It's in the text, but it's not on the map, so you watch out for that. I think it's in this one that happens. And then you go in the sewers and so forth. You could very easily expand out this whole sewer system to go onto the entire city and maybe hook up with that um, with that with the underground caves that are in that module in dungeon that I mentioned. You could really do a whole big thing about this and turn this into a locus for a campaign. So anyway, I do like it. I would absolutely recommend it if you can find a copy. I'll probably do another video on some of the other ones, and then I'll do a wrap up with Against the Slave Lords, kind of contrast and compare some of the differences and so forth, just like with the giants and that kind of thing. So anyway, hope you like this one. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.